let's get back to Niall Gardner. You could take this first, and I'm sure Anthony would want to jump in as well. If nobody knows how you solve that one tricky issue, the border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, there are other issues as well. But what are the options available to Theresa May? Say, if her plan is not going to make its way through the Parliament in Britain, Melissa and I were just wondering during the last break, I mean, is there going to be another referendum? Is that one of the things that might happen? And if so, might the results be different next time around?
Well, I think there's no way that the Conservative government is going to agree to another referendum, nor should there be another referendum. 17.4 million Britons voted in June 2016 to leave the European Union. Britain has to respect the will of the British people. There's no need for a second referendum. Britain's already had its people's vote already. The British people have spoken on this matter. So as long as there's a Conservative government, you're not going to have a second referendum. Now, the alternatives are to renegotiate the deal with the EU. That's not going to happen at all. The other alternative, of course, is to go down the no-deal route, which I think is absolutely inevitable here. And there's no prospect, I think, of the EU making any concessions on the Northern Ireland backstop issue. Let's not forget that the EU has negotiated this withdrawal deal with the United Kingdom in a very mean-spirited, very nasty fashion in order to issue a warning to other European countries of the consequences for leaving the EU. It's a sort of punishment beating that the EU has issued. So they're in no mood, actually, to make any concessions here. And the fact is that with the Northern Ireland backstop in place, Britain will be tied to the EU customs union indefinitely, which means that Britain cannot sign its own free trade agreements. That's at the very heart of the failure of Theresa May's deal, actually. And there's no way, I think, that she's going to get the EU to back down over this.
Ambassador, let me ask you, if there is a hard exit, as was suggested, if this deal doesn't go through, is that better or worse for the EU? I understand how you feel it would work out for the UK, but I'm just wondering that if the EU forces this scenario where there isn't a deal that can pass in the UK, are they better or worse off for having, forced this situation forward?
Well, of course, the EU doesn't want to have a hard no-deal Brexit. It would be bad for Europe. It's bad for uncertainty. It's bad for investment. So they're not wishing for that. They have actually done their best in this negotiation, so I disagree entirely. Look, all of the EU 27 have domestic politics as well. The key problem is that the UK, while it was a member, tried to have many of the benefits of non-membership. Now it wants to be a non-member with all of the benefits of membership. You can't have it. It's impossible. So that really, where we are today is in large part the logical consequence of the decisions and the red lines that were drawn by this Prime Minister a long time ago, and some of the ideological rhetoric that were just detached from reality. The EU cannot give a better deal to an exiting member than it gives to its existing or continuing 27.
Yeah. Wait, John, real quick, can you respond to that? Because, I mean, I think there are a lot of people that would say that that's why an EU didn't make sense in the first place. I mean, the ambassador mentioned that everybody has their domestic politics that they're trying to focus on, and that's kind of the point, is that the country's politics and needs don't align with all of Europe.
Yes, sovereignty is a big issue here. And let's not forget that we've had these matters related to taxation, different rates, a very low rate of taxation in Ireland, one of the EU countries, higher rates of corporate income taxation elsewhere. And those types of differences can cause strains and stresses that, question the longevity of the European Union and warn us that it doesn't solve all of the problems, all the differences that the member countries have.
Speaking of which, and Heather, you can weigh in on this, this is not the only story from this region that's in the news, right now, more or less over the last however many months. I mean, we're dealing with the protests in France. We're dealing with slowing economies in places like Germany, the budget issues in Italy, on and on it goes, along with what we're seeing in the UK. So when you make risk-related decisions and talk about where money should be flowing, how do you look at Europe in general? How much trouble do you think, Heather, Europe is in?
That doesn't sound like a great area to invest in right now. You're right, Colin. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty around the globe, more so in the EU than the U.S., and it just speaks to how globalized and interconnected we are now. I mean, today the markets were rallying on positive Chinese negotiations on trade. And I think the market will continue higher tomorrow because we do have certainty from this no confidence vote. Whether you agree with it or back it or not, or whether Brexit will pass or not, at least we got past this short-term event. And it just goes to prove that we are so globally interconnected. And it does matter. What happens in the EU does matter here at home in the U.S. and for our markets.
Yeah. Is Ashley still with us?
I think so.
Oh, okay. Ashley, do you really feel like it's the Northern Ireland situation? I mean, is that really the biggest thing that people are talking about? Or what is the main sort of sticking point or talking point that you're hearing when you talk to people out in the street? I know you like to go into the pub and talk to the locals.
Yeah, we don't know. Well,
that's where I do my best work, let's be honest. Yes, I think that is the key issue, certainly for the lawmakers, this concern. I think Boris Johnson described it as a lobster pot. It lures you in, and once you're in, you're trapped and you can't get out with regard to that backstop in Northern Ireland and being forever under the EU rules in that customs situation. There are others who say there are other aspects of Mrs. May's withdrawal agreement that still gives a little too much influence from the EU over courts, laws, over free movement, over trade issues, although Mrs. May says that's not true. Once the transition period is over at the end of 2020, Britain will be largely clear of the EU and free to do whatever it wants to do. But there is still this sense that the EU will have a little more influence than people would like. I mean, you know, all day we have protesters saying leave means leave. They want out. They were quite happy to have that hard Brexit, but it's just not an easy thing to do. And the ambassador brought up a very important point that an amendment was agreed upon in Parliament last week that will allow the parliamentary committees to stop a hard Brexit. They'll be able to take control and not allow that to happen. By the way, the bookmakers, when they start taking bets on what will happen, the outcome of Brexit, the favourite is a second referendum next year. The longest odds are for an agreement to be reached, which I think is really interesting.
But they have odds on whether it would pass? The second referendum?
Well, the longest odds, 10 to 1, is that it will pass. So it's a lot. It's 11 to 8 that it will be a second referendum, which I guess is, according to the bookmakers, the most likely outcome.
Got it. Those are the people we watch, especially over there, the bookmakers. Thank you to everyone. Ashley, we'll let you get back to your office and do some of your best work. And the panel there, we didn't get the guard news.
Thank you very
much.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Okay.